Hello, this is Melinda Rother, and today I am going to present a brief overview of the PBCore metadata schema. So first, starting with the purpose of the schema. Public Broadcasting Core, or PBCore, is a metadata XML-based schema used to describe audiovisual materials in a standardized fashion, and it is used generally for those materials that arise out of a broadcast environment. The standard contains, quote, unique fields and specialized controlled vocabularies to describe components that are unique to audiovisual materials. Okay, on to the history and reasons why it needed to be developed. So I couldn't find specific reasons stated, but as we'll see later, it turns out that broad schemas, like Dublin Core, for example, do not provide what needs to be specifically used for audiovisual materials. So, for example, like the aural qualities of these objects, or like the color quality, just like things that pertain to the video side of the object. And again, it's created for the public broadcasting community in the United States to, quote, share, manage, and preserve their audiovisual content, and it was first initiated by producers and local stations. But the schema's use has broadened to include moving image and media organizations and the management of their, quote, audiovisual assets and collections. So Public Broadcasting Core version 1.0 was released in 2005 with funding from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, or the CPB. And so this initial version was based on Dublin Core 1.0, and we'll see later how Dublin Core heavy some of the elements are. This version focused on access rights, along with the specification of whether it was a digital or physical version of a media asset or information object. It was aesthetically, it was flat, so basically just, I would assume this means like it's basically just listing the metadata of the object. The record is kind of just like in a list fashion. Version 1.2.1, though, which was released in 2007, it became more nested. So similar to like how mods is visually nested, to denote the different descriptions for the asset, which is the information object, and instantiation elements were included. And instantiation basically refers to the different versions an asset has. For example, like the master version of an asset, and then the preservation copy of the master, or like two different versions of an asset. Subsequent versions amended the schema to make it more robust. So basically, to sum it up, it's just more granularity is allowed in description. The current iteration, 2.1, was released in August of 2015, and this version clarifies element definitions, and optional attribute groups are expanded to allow for source attributes that mention where certain metadata comes from. So say that you're describing like a DVD box set, and you take the description of the box set directly from the box, you would put in the source attribute back of the box, or the box itself, or something like that, to provide information of where you got that information from. So moving on to guiding principles and the framework for the standard, I couldn't find anything specifically stated about like what the guiding principles of PBCore are, but from testimonials on the website, I gathered that it is considered fairly simple and efficient to use, this particular version of PBCore, and it can be granular when desired if it needs to be for the organization. It's adaptable to the environment in which it is employed, so two institutions can utilize the same PBCore field in different ways, and the standard can mesh in well with older standards if necessary. For example, if an institution has been using older cataloging standards, PBCore works compatibly with it. Element fields are again strikingly similar to Dublin Core elements and some mods elements. It is a fairly simple elemental structure, so it leads to sharing and interoperability. I would say that it is a familiar looking structure in some respect. Again, going back to the Dublin Core comparison, the required elements are very minimal. So you could do the more product, less process protocol there. So again, it doesn't require that much information into it if time does not allow. It is an open standard. It's free to use, and the learning materials are free also. So I guess we could say guiding principles overall. It is an open standard. Freedom of use. It is simple, efficient, and can be granular if needed. I just want to add after the fact that something I just realized, that PBCore also seems to abide by the one-to-one principle. So like one version of a certain object would get one record each. And we'll see this later with the instantiation element. So on to the elements. It has 15 containers, 82 elements, and the use of 49 XML attributes. So on to the first group of elements, and they are divided into 3 groups: the root elements, the asset elements, and the instantiation elements. So roots contains 3 elements. We got PBCore, PBCore description document, and PBCore instantiation document. So it's very helpful for me to think of PBCore collection and PBCore description document working like the mods root elements of mods and mods collection. So description document element is comparable to the mods root element, and it is the equivalent of one PBCore record, and PBCore collection, which is comparable to the mods collection root element, is a bundle of one or many records, according to the PBCore handbook. The PBCore instantiation document can only contain the instantiation elements, and basically what is being described here is if you want to describe like just one instantiation of the asset, basically describing like the versions of the asset with this root element. And so moving to asset elements, again, especially within the asset elements, it's very comparable to the Dublin Core basic elements and some mods elements, but some elements and attributes in the documentation have their own specialized control vocabularies to use for values made specifically for PBCore. So, for example, the asset type element utilizes a broad term relating to media for the content being described, like a movie or program. And for this element, PBCore devised a control vocabulary for this element, listing the various terms for asset types. Some elements, though comparable to Dublin Core mods, element names have different names like PBCore annotation, which functions similarly to the mods note element. So you basically include anything that you don't think that the standard itself allows for description. You just add in a note, perhaps about like the physical state of the materials or something like that. Moving on to PBCore instantiation. So it describes the version of the asset that is being described. It answers what form is the asset taking here in this record. So it appears here in this element set or element group that the most local elements are contained here. And basically this is sort of the, these are the application profile qualities, really, I guess, come out here. It's basically specific elements that are devised to describe like video and oral qualities of an information object. So like the duration of it, the color quality, what kinds of tracks compose the audiovisual material, onto the areas in which it is being used. So various organizations utilize PBCore, like public broadcasting organizations, digitization vendors, audiovisual archives for cataloging and documentation, and it is used for preservation projects also. So, for example, the digital vendor George Blood LP, which specializes in the preservation of audiovisual materials, uses PBCore to meet specific client needs, like the inclusion of expansive copyright info, or, quote, helping the documentation fit with an existing database. Wisconsin Public Television utilizes the instantiation metadata of their assets to keep track of their holdings over time, especially digital files. PBCore enables sharing of data, especially for linked data purposes. A multiple partner online repository project, which the Maryland Institute for Technology of the Humanities is a member of, is working to build an online radio and paper resource of materials held by the National Association of Educational Broadcasters. So again, we have PBCore being flexible to allow different descriptive systems, quote, from different repositories to interact with each other. And MITH facilitated this flexibility through creating a data model with, quote, linked data approaches and formats. And so overall, PBCore in this instance allows for a cohesive, consistent metadata collection. Now onto challenges. I couldn't find like current criticism of the standard, but there is criticism that of the schema leading up to the years of this current version. So this GitHub discussion from 2014 shows several users of the schema who found the definition of PBCore collection, for example, to be too vague, and they basically recommend like another name for the element. And another user responds that the PBCore documentation committee were actually working on clarifying element definitions. There was also criticism from 2014 in a presentation at the Association of Moving Image Archivists Conference, basically that the vocabulary was confusing, quote, bad and inconsistent. The definitions weren't clear. It isn't a very helpful schema for people who have no familiarity with metadata schemas at all. And it was hard to learn. And also just in terms of like actually implementing it, if you have a media saturated collection and with like lower quantities of like other formats in your collection, it's might not be compatible with those formats aside from like paper documents. But its current iteration, though, shows how active the communities of PBCore implementers are, and the community seems to answer criticism swiftly. So now moving on to an example, PBCore record for an audio asset, and this comes from Yale, from a mass digitization project that they have worked on. Of course, this looks familiar to us. It's telling us it's an XML file. We got the PBCore collection root, and it's telling us this will be a bundle of individual PBCore records. So moving on to the first element that would be important here, it's telling us that the asset type is a 12-inch lacquered disc, so it's a record. It was created in 1948. We have the various IDs here and the call numbers, and it's telling us, according to the description, that this is called, or it is Part 1, My Romance, Part 2, Men of Harlech, the Robert Shaw Chorale. So basically what this is indicating is that it's a double-sided record with, I guess, two songs, one called My Romance and Men of Harlech. So moving on, we have the rights summary. Now we're going to the instantiation, which basically is describing the asset that was just listed. Again, it's telling us it was created in 1948. It is a record. It is telling us that it is a sound media type. It is the master version of the asset. So instantiation generations basically tells you provenantial information of the copy or instantiation. So this is telling us master. This is the original version of the asset. The whole length of it, the two songs together, makes 7 minutes and 41 seconds. Has 2 audio tracks on it, which I believe refers to the 2 songs. It tells us the channel configuration. It is in stereo. So here are the specific aural qualities that, like Dublin chord does not provide. We have the channel configuration. It is in English. We have the essence track, which basically tells you how many tracks compose the item and like what kind of tracks are there. So there's only one because this is audio, so it will just be listed as audio. The playback speed is 78 RPM. We have some annotations about like, where it was made, where it was made, who made it, the physical condition of the item. And now moving on to the instantiation parts, which would basically document the songs on this record. So side 1 is 3 minutes and 12 seconds. It is an audio, again, essence track type, basically the same sorts of information as listed in the complete asset documentation. And then we have side 2. It's telling us it's 4 minutes and 29 seconds long. And again, the same sorts of information as above. And now we have another instantiation, another version, and this is now the preservation master of it. So this is a master, like a copy, a digitized copy of the preservation. It still retains the stereo quality, but now it is a WAV file. and it was made in 2018, July 31st. Moving along, it is telling us the the individual qualities of the songs on the digitized version of the record. We have the file size. We have the digitized information file size. It still retains the length, of course, but now it is a WAV file. Here's more digitized information that pertains to it now that it is digitized. And now it's telling us, hey, this is related to the master copy. This is where it came from. And some information about how it was created and digitized. Moving along, the same sorts of information are here found on the digitized version of side 2 of the digitized record. And moving along, now we have the access copy, which deserves its own instantiation elements and sets of elements. This is not a WAV file, it's an MPEG file, which I believe an access copy is lower quality than the master version. It was made on the same day, July 31st, 2018. Similar information that we found above. It's an MP3, it's an MP3 file. And now, we have all the different parts and how they are different now that they're the access copy and, the related information of that. Here's side 2. We have a final note about the quality control that they added with the instantiation annotation element. Hopefully this helps you conceptualize better what is meant, or how instantiation elements are utilized within PBCore records, because when I was just reading about it, it was kind of hard for me to grasp. So hopefully this helped you out a bit in understanding.